Last month at the Samsung Unpacked event, we got some hands-on time with the latest and greatest from Samsung, but I'll admit, I felt like I hardly spent any quality time with the S20. Aside from all of the people trying to fight for a demo unit all at the same time, a lot of our focus was on the new and intriguing Galaxy Z Flip. So in this video, we picked up our own S20 Ultra unit, and I wanted to give you my first impressions of this phone and talk about whether or not a lot of the features are worth the $1,400 price tag. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to get notifications whenever we share a video. Before we get started, it is worth noting that I don't think a lot of people purchase phones outright, meaning they don't pay the $1,400 all up front. To be fair to Samsung, my iPhone 11 Pro Max with 256 gigs of internal storage is not far off from the S20 Ultra in terms of price, especially if you're financing, as the phones are probably only a couple dollars apart per month. So you're paying a similar monthly rate for both of those phones, basically. Personally, I think phone prices these days are absurdly high, but if you want the best of the best, quote unquote, then you really have to pay up. So what exactly are you getting with the S20 Ultra for $1,400? Well, for one thing, you get the massive 6.9-inch display, and it really is the best in class. Samsung has always been the leader, in my opinion, when it comes to smartphone displays, and they certainly knocked it out of the park with the OLED display that now features a 120 Hz refresh rate. Now, out of the box, the settings are set to 60 Hz for the refresh rate and 1080p for resolution. And so if you do want to bump up the resolution to QHD, you can do that, but you won't be able to turn on the 120 Hz refresh rate. You'll have to stay at 1080p. That's a bit of a bummer, but my guess is that Samsung knows having both QHD and 120 Hz on will absolutely crush your battery life. So for me personally, I don't really notice a huge difference in 1080p and QHD, so I would much prefer having the buttery smooth look that you get with the 120 Hz display. The Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra is also absurdly priced because of the specs, because they basically just threw every major spec you can think of, maxed it out, and put it in this phone. So with that, you get the previously mentioned 6.9-inch QHD AMOLED display with a 120 Hz refresh rate. You get 12 gigabytes of RAM on the low end, or 16 gigabytes of RAM depending on which model you pick up. There's also 128 gigs or 512, again depending on the model, with the ability to expand that storage with a micro SD card. There's also a Snapdragon 865 processor, which is the latest and greatest chipset from Qualcomm. There's an in-display fingerprint sensor and a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, which so far for me in my very limited time has been pretty good, even with 120 Hz turned on. Samsung tried to go ultra in the camera department too, and out of the major OEMs in the US, Samsung camera performance for me has usually been towards the bottom of the list. And while there have been some reported issues and bugs already with the S20, the camera system does seem to be an improvement over last year's S10. We are currently working on our full camera comparison compared to the iPhone 11 Pro Max, and that video will be coming out this week, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video. And we're not going to go too far in depth with the camera comparison right now, but some of the more lavish and hyped up camera features are the 108 megapixel f1.8 wide angle lens, the 100x space zoom, which is so hyped up that it's literally printed on the back of the phone itself, and there's also 8K video recording capabilities. So starting with the 108 megapixel camera, what this means is basically you have a massive lens that can, in theory, produce some really great photos, but FYI, those photos are going to be massive in file size. But because the sensor is so big, it can let in a lot more light, and it can create natural depth of field, or bokeh, which is the look that you try to achieve when using portrait mode, but that's not really all natural. There's a lot of image processing that happens from your phone. Unfortunately, the S20 is currently suffering from some software bugs and limitations, and so trying to get really good images in focus when using this 108 megapixel feature has been kind of difficult. As far as 8K recording goes, well, that's also not great, or not as great as you might think it would be. While I will say the images from the camera can look fantastic at times, especially in great lighting conditions, the elimination of focus tracking with 8K, the massive crop factor, and file sizes that come with it might not be worth it over just shooting in 4K, which already gives you very good video for whatever you might need it for, and you get better focus capabilities, no rolling shutter, etc. Finally, the 100x space zoom feature is also really cool, but also not something I think we need at all. The images that you get out of the 100x zoom are hardly usable. What's more exciting is the quality at 30x. Now that is something I think Samsung should absolutely talk about more, the fact that their 30x zoom pictures are actually really, really good. And of course, we will talk about all of the camera quirks and features in our next video, so stay tuned on that. Finally, the S20 lineup also brings consumers one more feature, and that's 5G. The good news here is that it's not limited to strictly the Ultra, and that all three S20 phones come with 5G compatibility. In a few years, 5G phones will probably be the new normal, and it won't seem so over the top, but in my limited test with 5G, it's just not something consumers really need to have right now. When I tested 5G in Chicago on Verizon last year, we achieved some absolutely ludicrous speeds, maxing out nearly 2 gigabytes per second on the 5G ultra wideband network. But it doesn't cut through buildings well, or really at all, and you had to be pretty much near the specific 5G node in order to achieve speeds like that. I use T-Mobile here in Cleveland, and we just got T-Mobile's version of 5G, which is currently running on the 600 megahertz wave. And speeds were great at over 108 down and around 30 upload. But when I ran a speed test on my iPhone running on T-Mobile's LTE network, my speeds were almost exactly the same, if not better, on LTE. So personally, I don't think 5G should be a selling point on whether or not you go with the new S20. Now, it is nice to have the future proof with 5G on your phone if you're someone who hangs on to your phone for 3 or more years. But if you upgrade on a regular basis, meaning every year you're taking advantage of the upgrade or even 2 years max, then it's not something that should be a key selling point at this current moment in time. Though, again, it's definitely a nice feature to have if you hang on to your phone for long periods of time. As I said earlier, $1,400 outright for a phone is absolutely ridiculous, and even paying $60 a month for a smartphone seems absurd, but that's kind of where we're at right now with smartphone prices. And there are other phones out there that are definitely just as good at doing the normal phone things that you need for everyday consumers. But again, to be fair, when people ask me what iPhone to get, I almost never tell them to go with the iPhone 11 Pro Max unless I know they want the best available, even though the 11 is far more than enough phone at half the cost. The same logic can be applied here with the S20 lineup, as the S20 is more than enough for everyday consumers over the S20 Ultra, and it's a lot cheaper. But if you want a massive phone with tons of features, just to say you have it, well, then by all means, that's why Samsung created the Ultra in the first place, and you should just go with that. So go ahead and let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below on the Galaxy S20 Ultra. Is it worth the price? Are you thinking about picking one up over an iPhone 11 Pro Max? What are the reasons why? And also, are you someone who upgrades your phone every year, 2 years, 3 years? Would love to know, just genuinely intrigued. Go ahead and let me know in those comments. This has been Dan with Mac Rumors. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around in the next video.